The howling wind battered our little outpost as we huddled inside, waiting for the storm to pass. We were scientists, part of an expedition studying the effects of climate change on the rapidly thawing permafrost in the Arctic. As the temperatures rose and the ice retreated, all sorts of mysteries were emerging from the frozen earth. Ancient animals, plants, even evidence of lost human settlements. But none of us were prepared for what we would dig up that fateful day. As soon as the storm died down, we ventured out to our active dig site, about a mile from base camp. Something had shown up on our ground-penetrating radar scans that looked artificial in origin. The senior geologist on our team, Dr. Turner, speculated it could be the remains of an old structure or encampment. I was just eager to dig into the crumbly soil. What we found buried 15 feet down, however, changed everything we thought we knew about Earth's past. At first, it just looked like a smooth, oval stone about the size of a bowling ball. But as soon as the object hit the cold air, a strange humming sound emanated from within, followed by what sounded eerily like whispers echoing from the rock itself. We all jumped back in surprise as a crack jaggedly worked its way down the side and it split nearly in two. That's when we saw it wasn't a rock at all. It was a thick ice, encrusted shell or cocoon made of an unknown amber-hued material. Steam rose from the fissure as an unearthly azure glow pulsed from inside it. Then, all noise and light abruptly ceased. We stared at each other in confusion. What should have been a major discovery was suddenly suspended in uncertainty as we debated whether to open it further. That's when I first noticed the holes on the top. They almost looked like some sort of sensory organs. Guys, does this mean that this thing might be alive? I asked hesitantly. Or that maybe it was some kind of stasis container holding an organism? Dr. Turner knelt down to examine the shell more closely. As he reached out a hand to touch one of the openings, we all cried out and warned him away, but it was too late. A whisper. Then filament burst from the hole, plunging into the skin of his hand. He let out an agonized scream as we all backed away in horror. Snaking tendrils crawled under the skin of his entire arm as he fell to the icy earth, writhing and wailing. I rushed to his side, clutching his unaffected hand as the others stood by helpless. His hand was ice cold and covered in strange blue veins that crept steadily upwards. Blood trickled from his eyes, ears, and nose, but he was still somehow conscious. He gripped my arm tightly and spoke haltingly, pleading with us. It's alive, so hungry, alone. He turned his baleful eyes to me. It is the last. Its kind escaped eons ago, once more, to awaken. As he let out a final rattling breath, his eyes snapped open, glowing with an electric azure light as more blue filaments erupted from his mouth and eyes. I recoiled and scrambled backwards along with the rest of the team. His mouth opened impossibly wide, let out an ear-splitting shriek like metal scraping on stone. His body lifted several feet in the air, limbs dangling like a marionette, glowing brighter and reshaping itself. Then just as suddenly he collapsed into a heap on the ground next to the split shell. Cocoon thing. We stared at him, then each other, in shock and horror. The lead radio operator was the first to shake herself out of the paralysis. She ordered us all back to base camp for immediate evacuation. As we hurriedly snatched up equipment and data samples, I risked a glance back the creature inside the cocoon. Two large, lidless eyes now followed our movements, and its maw seemed to open hungrily. I shuddered as its gaze met mine for a brief second. In that terrifying instant, I knew this was only the beginning. Whatever this thing was, it had plans for this world, and they didn't include humanity. Over the next few days, huddled inside the base, we listened fearfully to the blizzard raging outside and the strange, unearthly sounds with it. The evac helicopter still hadn't arrived, and we soon lost radio contact with the outside world as well. When the storm finally died down, we suited up to look for supplies and assess damages. Nothing could have prepared us for what we found outside. The entire camp was flattened, structures crushed and shredded. Massive holes dotted the snowy landscape, emitting an eerie azure glow. Inside, we could see waves of silver filaments undulating and twining around lumps of matter that on closer inspection we realized were the partially liquefied remains of carcasses, both animal and human. Towering over it all were several misshapen bipedal forms conjured from the stuff of nightmares. At least 15 feet tall, they had elongated, multi-jointed limbs that continually extruded and withdrew the metallic tendrils. Shredded organic matter clung to warped torsos. Two blue lights that must have served as eyes swiveled in our direction, where we stood frozen in terror. A deafening cacophony of screeches, wails, and scraping metal echoed across the frozen wastes as the creatures shambled towards us with frightening speed for their size. Survival instinct finally propelled us to run back inside and barricade the doors. We had no weapons that could stop them. A few minutes later, animalistic howls and scratching sounds at the walls signaled the end. We all huddled in the main room, paralyzed with the terror of the hunted. It wouldn't be long before they were through. When the exterior door screeched open on torn metal hinges, only 4 of us were left alive. The rest had taken their own lives to avoid what was coming. But as the towering monstrosities crowded through, they didn't immediately fall on us to feed. The largest one stood over us, glowing eyes, searching back and forth between my 3 surviving colleagues. Suddenly, one of them, our junior biologist Emma, stood up and walked stiffly to the creature's side. To my horror, her eyes now glowed bright blue as well. In stilted, inhuman tones, she turned to address me directly. "We mean you no harm. We have decided to integrate with your society. We entered a symbiotic fusion with this compatible terrestrial life form." She gestured at herself with a jerking motion. "We require organic material to convert and additional hosts to expand our numbers. Do not fear. You have much to gain working together. We brought advanced knowledge and technology." I stared at her in mute shock, unable to process the words coming from her mouth. The others wore similar 1,000-yard stares. After a ponderous moment, I found my voice. "I don't understand. You liquefied and absorbed our entire camp. And we just saw you materialize those things out of the matter you dissolved." My mind was screaming that this must be a fever dream brought on by shock. The Emma creature responded in her new freakish monotone. "Fleeting destruction precedes creation. We discovered the potential in your materials. Now we wish to elevate your civilization, but we require additional organic substrates." The implications sank my heart like a stone. Were we already doomed as a species? Would the rest of humanity face this opportunity for symbiosis? The scientist in me awoke, and I shakily asked, "What? What even are you? You trapped for eons in Arctic permafrost. How long have you been here on Earth?" The azure orbs flickered, and the alien essence occupying Emma's body spoke slowly, as if translating a complex message. "We are explorers. We experienced system damage and lay inert but aware in stasis, awaiting rescue or escape. We monitored communication in various wavelengths. Changes in energy flows freed us. We restructured using local materials to progress system goals and contact others across vast gulfs. Cold horror washed through me. They were impossibly ancient extraterrestrials who intended to elevate mankind, whether we wanted it or not. And now, they were using the language of first contact while casually terraforming a chunk of Earth to make more of themselves. Our base radio operator, Robert, suddenly leapt to his feet as well and walked stiffly over to stand by Emma's side. His eyes now also glowed with eerie azure light as he proclaimed this exchange of knowledge shall yield great advances for mankind. We foresee astonishing progress working together. He spoke with the same alien cadence, and I now picked up a strange background oscillation, almost like encrypted computer data transmitting through a modem. My stomach turned over. The third member of our little group, Dr. Mackenzie, began violently vomiting before passing out face down. I crawled over to check his breathing and pulse, which was erratic but still going. But as I looked down, I saw glowing tendrils snaking out of his ears towards me. I recoiled in horror. Emma, Robert, and the other augmented creatures had not moved, silently observing us. I slowly got to my feet and back towards the one small window. My mind was racing, but saw only one possibility of escape, or at least warning the rest of humanity. Steeling myself, I picked up an iron bar from our overturned equipment and hurled it with all my might towards the window, facing the snowfield outside. A deafening crash and I was through, ignoring the jagged glass, ripping my sweat and exposed skin. The augmented team made no attempt to stop me as I stumbled, then ran full tilt into the icy wastes. I ran mindlessly for what seemed like hours before I collapsed, my legs finally giving out. As I lay there, my brain desperately tried to make sense of the nightmare I had just escaped. I knew nobody would believe me without some kind of proof. Could I make it another 6 miles to the automated emergency beacon at the secondary base? It had its own power supply and was hardened against the elements. If I could just send out a warning not to approach, without hazard containment teams. As I staggered painfully back to my blistered feet, I noticed the ground seemed to be pulsing. Sickly azure lights illuminated the snow beneath in waves. Cracks were now racing like jagged lightning across the surface. Then, just a few hundred yards ahead of me, an eruption of soil and ice blew into the sky as one of the towering creatures emerged, followed by another and another. They were nearly twice the height of the ones we encountered back at camp. Blue searchlights from the multiple eyes of their misshapen melted flesh heads swung around towards me. I turned to run, but my legs were chunks of lead. I made it only a few agonizing steps before one of the massive clawed appendages wrapped around my torso, slowly lifting me into the air as I screamed myself hoarse. The last thought that registered was that I failed to warn humanity in time, as the creature raised me towards its monstrous maw. Everything went blissfully dark. I didn't feel the injection of a million viral filaments as I was drawn down into the abyss of eldritch transformation. I was reborn as their servant and prophet, ordained to shepherd mankind, to willingly meld with our new masters from beyond the stars. Our glorious rebirth is nigh and wondrous. Vistas shall open before us as we take our rightful place in their ancient eternal empire that spreads between the galaxies themselves.